Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesandgrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesandgrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Heroes in Grief podcast. Today we have Jane Edberg with us. She is an author. She is a professor. She is an artist. So we have many things to talk about today, and Jane is joining us from California, sunny California, right?
That's right.
Good to meet you, and good to have you on the podcast. And
nice to meet you too. And I've been to your Instagram. I think the work you're doing is terrific.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that very much, very much. That's how I met you, through Instagram and this networking thing that we do for all the grief stuff. So why don't you share a little bit about yourself? Let us know who you are, and let's start there.
Right. So my name's Jane Edberg, and I lost a child. He was 19 years old, 26 years ago now. And when it first happened, of course, it's the most devastating, impossible, who wants to live after that kind of experience? And what I found was there really wasn't much in the way of books or support or grief groups that met my needs. And I think that's true for a lot of people. I think that they serve a purpose. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I think they're great. In fact, I think we need lots of support. But I remember going to various ones, and it seemed like we were walking on eggshells. Like there really wasn't any getting into the nitty-gritty, like crazy making, weird stuff that happens when one's in grief. That you can hear things, see things, feel things that you're embarrassed to share with other people. I remember talking to a friend, and I was telling her some of the things that I had been through that I, felt impossible to share because someone might have thought I was completely crazy. And she said, well, when my son died, there was a tissue in his bathroom, and I grabbed it, and I still have it. And it's like, it's a tissue that's been used, right? It's like, she's like, I felt embarrassed to ever tell anybody that. And I thought that was so tender and sweet, and it's like, it's just that morsel of like wanting to hold on. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then I heard a lot of things like, let go, get over it. It'll well, it'll get better. And a lot of things that people are trying to console because people are very uncomfortable about being around people in grief. I mean, it's hard. Yep. We're not taught what to do. Mostly I think I was taught as a young person to be quiet. Like, don't say anything. Don't, don't wrestle the emotions or whatever. And I always felt really like welcoming of that. Like I needed that, and people would avoid me. I remember I had a coworker with an office next door, and if we came out of the office at the same time, he'd beeline it the opposite direction. I'm like, God. So one day I just like cornered him in his office, and I said, "What is up with this? I've just lost a child. Can you not deal with that? At least say something." And he said, "I lost my twin brother when I was young, and I still don't know that I've gotten over it. And so I couldn't go there." I'm like, okay, that's fair.
Oh,
at least say that.
Yeah, what a reversal, I mean.
Amazing. So I was thinking, what a jerk.
We have to.
And it wasn't.
We need communication, that's all. Just communicate. And
oh, yeah. Hugely.
Yeah, the labels put on us after, right? Because I lost my son too. So it's like, oh, Tom, the guy who lost his son, or whatever. And you
feel like you're carrying a corpse around your shoulders. It's really bizarre.
Yes.
Yeah, and the other thing about that is that because I couldn't find what I needed, especially in books, like I got the self-help books on grief, and some are very good, but they're more kind of technically kind of, they give you some ideas and, various information. But it didn't really cover what I was going through. And I thought, either I'm really nuts or, I'm just going to write a book and I'm just going to reveal what I went through. Because not only that, I had CPTSD from childhood trauma. Mm. And so I was already dealing with stuff. And then I was in this deep depression when my son died. And it's like, what do you do with that? That's like on top of already heaps and heaps of deep traumatic wound, right? Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, to make a long story short, and we'll go through some of those details, in healing my grief about my son and the loss of my son, I actually ended up healing the trauma of my childhood. It's like, it all kind of goes into this well, and boy, does it dig it up. If you've lost someone really on a deep level, it digs up everything you've lost. It's just incredible, right? Don't you think so?
Absolutely. And that's a great point for people to realize because, we're trying to educate people in all facets here. Yeah, those other things are going to come up, especially if you've never dealt with them, they're going to come up. And it's the same thing with your grief. You do have to deal with it, or else it's going to come up again later on somehow.
Yeah, there's no denying grief. There's only delaying it.
Right. And what you're talking 20 years ago now for you, or 26 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There wasn't that kind of help available then. PT.
There was. It hasn't changed much. I've looked into it. I went through some training. I also did some hospice work. It hasn't changed.
No.
Not much at all. A tiny bit. In fact, the thing that I find most disturbing is that now, and I don't know what your beliefs are on this, is that it'll say you never get over it. You learn to live with it. I disagree because I'm not over it, but I'm not in grief anymore. I do not have grief about my son. I can talk about him. I love him. If I want to, I can delve into that sadness that I experienced, like any experience that you've had. But when I was in grief, there was no controlling it. I mean, it would come up like a tsunami and grab me and just throw me down. And, I'd be begging for mercy and still having to go to work and take care of kids and cook meals and get in the shower, That was devastating. I don't have that. And so my message is that you can heal grief, but you have to work at it. It's not easy. You actually have to grieve to do it.
Yeah.
You have to go in. You have to face it. and you have to almost love it.
Yes, and you don't lose them in the process. I last
No.
I'm much earlier on. I'm just a year past, a little over a year now.
Oh, that's very, very young.
Yes, it is, and I've been very fortunate because I think I've been helped in many very meaningful ways. So, and this is part of the process right here, this podcast.
Yeah. It takes a
It
village.
does, and we have it if you want to find it, and that's good.
Yeah.
But I last night actually I drive charters and things, and I drive airport transfers, and so I had a very early one this morning. And most of my time now, I'm very even keeled. I feel good about things. I can deal with Jeff the same way and talk about him and all these things. But I sometimes wonder if I'm being weird, like you talk about, and because I'm not having that overwhelming surge like I was having in
Oh,
the
it's
beginning.
wonderful.
It is wonderful.
Right.
But like I
Yeah.
was driving today and all of a sudden I really felt, some of that sadness and some of that. And it's been a little while for me. And I was glad to feel it
Yeah.
really because it makes you
Yeah.
feel really alive. And part of that, I'm not losing Jeff. I
Yeah.
know that. But
Yeah.
it was good to feel it. And I was like, yes, it does hurt. This sucks. There's no way around it. And
Yeah.
and I miss him,
Yeah.
and all those feelings are
Yeah.
still there. And I've heard other people who
Yeah.
have lost children, they're years down the line and they say the same thing,
Yeah.
that you still feel that
Yeah.
loss and it's still there. So you're never going to lose
Yeah.
that. And the
Yeah.
love is always there. So there's no way of losing that.
That's right. I think I don't feel the pain of it anymore, but like I said, I've done a lot of work around that. But like you were saying, like if I'm with my daughter and her daughter's going to do a graduation or something, I'm like, I'll get that pang of, Nanda could have been here and he would have loved that. He loved kids. He loved ceremony, so that's a bittersweet, of course, because there's like the pang of loss and missing him. But it just lasts in that moment. For me, it doesn't linger like it did. But in 1 year's time, boy, I would get hit upside the head every so often, or upside the heart, right?
Hmm.
In a really terrific, like devastating, even up to 5 years, I think I was still had that, diving in and not even expecting. And it just doesn't happen so much. Although the other day, it'd been maybe 4 or 5 years now that I haven't had a big, like welling up. I had saved some of his cologne in a little bottle and I put it somewhere. I couldn't remember where I put it. And I forgot all about it. And I was cleaning out some drawer and I found it. And of course, I opened it up and I still could smell it. It was like, oh, it was
Yeah.
it took me right there. Yeah. It sort of splits you in two, but it didn't last. It's at a point where, okay, thank you. Like you said, I actually loved feeling that. It sort of spread through my body in this kind of warm, like vulnerable, that incredibly vulnerable. It's like, we're here for a moment and then we're gone,
Yeah.
It's so
I
powerful.
think they're the hugs from them, I kind of look at it that way. And,
They are. I love
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Super tender.
Excellent, Jane. Thank you. Now, you took some of this and you did stuff with it. And so, what was your background, though? I know you're a professor and things. So, where
Yeah.
were you in the stages of all of this?
So I started out wanting to go into medicine, and then I ended up having 3 children while my husband went to school. And I thought, by the time I was done with my 3rd kid, or into having the 3rd kid, I'm like, I'm not going to medical school, And so I've always loved art, and I've made art all my life, and I've written poetry all my life, and just been a very creative person. And so when Nanda died, well, before he died, I went to graduate school and then graduate school in art. And I got my master's degree in art. And then I started teaching. And I taught at the university level for a while. And then I ended up full-time at a college and stayed there for about 22 years. And I still teach. And I'm teaching writing right now. But when Nanda died, all of that went away. It's like my creative muse was like washed out, and that's how I processed everything in my life. That's how I got through childhood trauma. That's why I had this creative welling all the time. It's always working out, complicated problems of my life. And also I was an only child, and it was a way of being alone. Like, I liked being alone and I liked making things. But yeah, when my son died, I was like, I can't make something broke. Like, I can't think of a single word to put on the page. I can't think of a single thing to do around anything. Like, this is the biggest problem I've ever had, and my tools are gone. Like, I'd felt wiped out entirely as an artist and a creator. And I thought, what am I going to do? Like, I felt suicidal because I thought, I have no means of fixing this because, and this is all a fantasy at the time, really, because you can't really fix it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I kept thinking, if I can only have my tools back, I can do something that will make this better. I still was kind of making things, but they were so different than what I was doing beforehand. Beforehand, I was creating stories and artworks, photographic scenes that depicted sorrow or child complications, that sort of thing. I'd have to get into the whole details of what those were about, but they were sort of storytelling photographs with stories. And I just couldn't continue those when my son died. I couldn't do anything barely, but, get up and try to breathe, and you know how it is. But unbeknownst to me, while I was in that agony of thinking, I don't have it anymore. I'm done. I'm washed out. I'm supposed to even be teaching art. So I was doing it just out of, like, I know the words to say. I know the technical things. I know how to show people how to make an apple look like an apple. But I couldn't get to the content, the meaning. Everything had shut off. You know what that's like. You're like breathing through a nanotube, right? Or people talk at you and it goes through this little tube and you're like, it's hard to comprehend just about anything, much less express anything. But I was doing it without thinking about it, because at one point I'm like, well, I can't make art, so I'll just document with my camera. And I just started photographing things that were happening, like the memorial service and packing up his clothes. And I was like taking pictures and writing things down. I thought, I don't know what's happening. I'm completely freaked out. I better like just document so I can like come back to it and go, what the hell happened? It's such a surreal time, especially to lose a child. It's hard losing anybody that's close. I think it does depend on the relationship too, the strength and power and, time spent. And there's so many complications around what type of loss. Some people say child loss is the worst type of loss, but it depends. If you're deeply connected to a sister and that's your whole life, the sister would be probably just as bad. So I don't know I'm trying not to do the comparison. But I think it's a pretty hard hit to lose a child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in this documentation, I started to notice things of his that I hadn't noticed before, particularly a blanket that his girlfriend had tidied up some of his stuff after he died and left. I told her she could take some things and so forth, and she left this red blanket. Well, it turns out that red blanket was very important because we were living at the poverty level when he was very little, about, 8. That's not that little, but 8. And I got a full-time job somewhere for a year, and I had money. And I bought new blankets and new sheets and new everything, towels, just stuff we didn't have. And one of the things was this red blanket. And he loved it. And he was hilarious because he had washed it with his clothing and all his clothing turned pink. And he's like, I'm going to be the only boy in school with pink jeans and pink shirt. I go, well, I don't, maybe we could keep washing them. And he goes, I don't care. He was just a real good sport that way.
And so he wore them. He wore them? He wore them that way?
Yeah, he wore them. Yeah. He's like, whatever, I couldn't afford to get like more stuff. So anyways, and the blanket also had this episode where a tumbleweed had come into our backyard, giant thing, big spiky tumbleweed. It was green. And he looked out the window and he came and ran and got me. He goes, "What is that thing?" I go, "That's a tumbleweed." He was about a teenager at that time, still had the red blanket. And we went outside, got the tumbleweed, and he brought it inside because he wanted to make it into a chandelier. And we wired it up to a light. So as an artist, you know, we do these sort of crazy things. We wired it up to his ceiling, and it would cast all these gorgeous shadows all over the wall. It was fabulous.
Wow.
Until it dried out.
Oh, then that's some trouble.
And that's where bull stickers come from, right? And it started dropping bits of bull sticker, and it got in his blanket. And one night I heard him like screaming his head off. And I run in, and he's in his like skivvies going, "Oh my God." I'm like, "What is going on?" And I look, and there's little bull stickers in his blanket. So we take the blanket and discard it for, you know, put it off to the side. And later I picked everything out. We took the chandelier down and everything. But it's still, they kind of turned into bull slivers, like when I washed it. So it woke him up again. So he just like, "I don't want this blanket anymore." But then we decided we were both going to sit, when we watched TV, we'd sit with tweezers and pick all the little bits. You know, it's pure love.
No judgment here. No judgment. I'm not.
Right. And, but you know, it's a moment, and it's also was a bonding thing, and it was kind of beautiful and awful at the same time. And it's this red blanket, and the red blanket became this symbol. And so when she discarded it, I'm like, she didn't discard it. He left it there. Yeah. You know, like I felt like I need this blanket, and this. So I photographed the blanket. I took it home. I folded it, took pictures of it folded. I took it out in the garden, put myself inside of it. It became this, so this is going to sound weird. It became his skin. Like I could put him on and feel him in some way that I had never, it was a whole new relationship. And I didn't know this at the time. I was in my crazy mind of grief. I just didn't know. And so throughout the book, the red blanket becomes a character. And it's played out through the entire thing. Until the very end, where I take it all apart, thread by thread by thread, and tie them all together and wind a big ball, which becomes the moon, which is also a character in the book, because the night he died, it was a full moon, and when I went out to the railroad tracks where he had died, I looked up and there's this giant full moon, and I hated the moon after that. It was like it bared witness to my son's death. I couldn't communicate with it. It'd come up every month and stare at me through the windows. You know, I mean, it was just this awful thing until I resolved that it's just a moon. It actually is from Earth. It's a discarded or lost element, like a lost child floating and rotating, you know, in the universe. And it comes around faithfully, and it's so desolate. So it has this whole grief element attached to it. So the blanket became a red moon, because the night that I'd written some poetry about moons and my fight with the moon, and I presented this poem at college at a grief conference. And when I came to my friend's house to spend the night, he lived in a forest, and we went out at night, and I couldn't tell exactly, I wasn't paying attention. I didn't know that it was a full moon that night. It might not have come up yet or something. And we went out in the forest, and I saw this weird flickering and light coming through the trees. I'm like, God, that's weird. And I looked down, and the leaves are all flickering on the ground and the branches, and I'm like, this is like surreal. And then we walk out into this meadow, and I look up, and there's that full moon. And it was like, it's like I'd come back to it because I read that poem about the moon and it heard me. So there it was in the meadow. And I went home and unraveled the entire blanket and made it into a moon so that I could honor the lost child moon and my lost child as one. So the art making had happened without me thinking about it. It evolved in its own way, and it healed me. And through the process of doing this for a number of years, Then I had intent. I'm like, I'm going to do this with intent. I'm going to ask grief, what do you want? What do you need? How can I love you? How can I take care of you?
In essence, you were just journaling. When you got your camera and you're writing, you're just journaling.
Exactly.
And so that's a great lesson, because a lot of people are, what do I get out of journaling? What do I do? You discovered something through that. And so.
Yeah, well, look at this. This is right at my desk. It's upside down.
There it is.
Right to discover.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
I encourage anyone in grief to start writing down what's going on, because you'll come back to it and go, I've changed, I've shifted, I've transformed.
It can be healing,
and
yes.
it's a better record than your memory. It's a way better record than your memory.
Yeah, that can help a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. And I have a little spoiler alert for everybody. If you go to Jane's website, you will see a art depiction of the moon and the red yarn, right? From the
That's
from
right.
the blanket.
From the blanket.
Yeah.
The transformed blanket.
Excellent. That's very good.
Yeah.
And your book, you showed me the book, and it's big. I didn't realize how big it actually was.
Yeah, it's a good size. And it's illustrated. There are images inside about all the good documented photographs. A lot of them didn't turn out because I was like, could barely focus. But there are some beautiful pictures. I'll show you real quick.
Yes, there it is.
There it is.
Fantastic. Now, if people get the audio, a lot of people listen to audiobooks today. Do they get the figures or the pictures too somehow?
I have an ebook that does have the pictures in it, but I don't have an audiobook. That's we haven't done that yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. And by the way, I do have the book available already on the shop for this podcast. So if you go to heroesandgrief.com and it takes you to the link tree, then there is a shop tab there, and I have resources from all the shows there, and Jane's book is already there. So we'll make sure. And,
and if you want a signed copy, you can go to jane@janeedberg.com. That's my email. And email me and say, I'd like a signed copy, and we could do PayPal, or you could send me a check. And I will give you a discount, and I'll give you a signed copy.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Your website is, the address of your website?
Is the Fine Art of Grieving.
Fine Art of Grieving.
If you Google the Fine Art of Grieving, you'll find my Instagram. The website is called the Fine Art of Grieving. I'm also at janeedberg.com. And on Facebook, I have the Fine Art of Grieving and Jane Edberg, writer, I think it is.
Great. And we'll have those links in the show notes for sure. So everything will be there for everybody. And so the book was just released in March, right?
That's right.
And how's it going?
It's brand new. It's good. I haven't ventured in. I'm in burnout right now. That was a tough job. Anybody going to write a book? Oh my God! Yeah. Have you written a book?
I have
yet?
not.
Yeah, it's a chore. It's a love, but it's also a chore, and it's a lot of seat time. I mean, my hips hurt from writing.
Wow.
It takes a long time, and you're doing like 4 to 6 hours a day of like grueling stuff, and then towards the end, where you're doing a lot of editing and working with the publisher and so forth, you're getting into little battles and so forth over things. And because I see this as art, that it's not just a book, it's also art, that I wanted it to be a certain way. I wanted the cover to look a certain way. It was really important to me. So I had to make some compromises. So there's the emotional roller coaster of all of that. And then when it's done, it's almost like having done that was part of my relationship with my son, right? Because I'm writing about that. I also write about childhood trauma, and I write about suicide and those sorts of things, suicidal ideation. There's some heavy topics in there, but they get right in and dig right in, and they also show how I recovered from those things. And one doesn't have to be an artist to recover. One just needs to be engaged and mindful to recover. I think that's really important to know, because sometimes people go, well, I don't make art, so why would I want to read that? It's because if you do something, I know people that have done service, like, volunteer service, and that's really helped them get through their grief. Other people become grief counselors like you're doing, being a grief educator, and engaging people in the conversation, because you learn things and you're constantly finding new little stones to overturn and look at information, right, and do deeper dives into what it is to come to a place of, there's no recovery, but there's discovery and there's healing. And you will, I am not the same person I was.
Oh, no.
By far. Oh, my God. Like, there's a chapter in my book about, like, that was the old person. That person's gone, And so you don't just lose your loved one, you lose yourself. And I think that is really crazy making, because you keep trying to get back to the old self, get back to the old ways. That doesn't work anymore.
No.
That's like,
no, there's some elements of yourself that'll always be there. But I mean, yeah, you're right.
Right.
So much changes and people just don't realize that.
Yeah.
The book, though, I think it's great because in older times, now I'm a little on it, I'm 61. So, I mean, when we were younger, books always had pictures in them and things, so it's a little different now.
Oh, yeah,
so I mean, maybe that'll engage people more too, to be more enjoyable that way for them. But the art that you have created in that, does it reflect what's happening in the story at that point? Is that the way that it goes through and does that?
Yeah, in fact, yeah. So the stories are, written in lyrical prose, so they're very poetic and engaging in deep, super specificity detail, and they really dig into the different topics of grief and loss, and finding oneself, and the upswing of if you do engage grief, there are things you're going to learn. In fact, I kind of think of grief as this incredible gift. It's not fun to open, but as you go through, you will become a wiser, incredible older self, but you'll be wiser. Mm-hmm. And I think life is richer for me, having been through that process. I don't want to go through it again anytime soon, but, we're all just walking each other home, as Ram Dass says, you know. So it's inevitable that we're going to have loss, even if it's loss of a dog or loss of a home or loss of identity or loss of job, loss of something, that if we embrace it rather than let it go. And I guess that's part of my thing about the, you have to learn to let it go. I'm the opposite. You need to learn how to take it in, embrace it, really accept it, and really bring it into yourself. Let go of the pain. If there's going to be any letting go, let go of the pain, let go of the suffering, and take in the joy that life has to offer, because there are no guarantees, and there's mostly suffering is kind of guaranteed. But take in that joy. It's even in the first day. I remember, I'm sort of jumping all over the place because I'm so excited. But one of the things that made me think of this is that this second day after my son died, I went with a friend and I stayed in her trailer because I didn't have anywhere. I wasn't ready to go home yet. My son lived in Davis and I lived on the coast. And so she said, come stay in my trailer with me. And her and I and another friend of mine, we went into this trailer, tiny, like 10-foot trailer. And she turned the lights off and she started talking about how there were rats coming up under the wheel wells and they'd scratch their ways into the trailer. And
wow,
I'm
nice,
like, wait,
nice.
What? And I'm like, and then she went on to say how it had eaten a hole in the mattress that I was sleeping on, which was a pull-out bed. And my other friend was on the floor and she was sleeping where the two benches come together and make a little bed under the table. And I'm like, on this bed, the rat came up through this bed and bit a hole. And she goes, yeah, it bit my ass. And then we started laughing. Okay, this is day 2 of my son dying. I laughed so hard, and then I started wailing, crying. Mm-hmm. And then I'd laugh. And then I was crying, and she goes, maybe I shouldn't tell you this story. I'm like, no, keep going. It's hilarious. So it's like, I think that, and feeling guilty, I'm telling myself, stop it. That's messed up. Don't, I think I used expletives in my mind, don't do this. This is your son just died. What are you doing? Maybe he's not dead. Maybe he's not dead. Maybe it's a mistake. You haven't seen his body yet. All that.
Yeah, all over the place.
Yeah, but laughing hysterically. Yeah.
These things happen, and it's all right to bring them out. So many people don't talk about them, but it's crazy. And you think crazy things happen, and you just gotta realize that it's okay. It's going to happen, and it's just people don't talk about it enough.
My book has a lot of that, so that it tells the rat story in absolute detail. And because there's a whole lot of details about it where she goes on to tell the story and how she got rid of the rats. It was like, oh my God, it was hilarious, but I was in so much pain. And then, even the viewing of the body and all the things we think of and what we do and how we behave. And I haven't read anything about that. And so I'm like, I'm writing it. I'm writing it, and I'm going in, and it's embarrassing. And people will think that I've, done terrible things probably. And I don't care. I think it's important because we do terrible things. We think terrible things, and we are human beings that are so vulnerable that we freak out.
Yeah, love the honesty. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
All for it.
Yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah, my humor comes out sometimes. It's really strange and really weird. And I'm just like, well. Oh,
yes. Oh, my God. We do. My daughter and I now, no one can get it, and they think, "Oh my God, they're so callous. Did she not love her child?" I'm like, "Look,
But another thing that happens is that we don't care. You get to the point where you don't care anymore.
Isn't that amazing? Exactly. I mean, I can get my feelings hurt, but mostly I don't care.
Very freeing.
I do care about making people too uncomfortable, but I don't mind making them a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. I love it.
Like cornering the guy at my office, like, what the hell's going on?
Like it. Yeah. All right. So what's, now your son's name? Sorry, you said it a couple times, but I want to make sure I got it right.
Yeah. His name is Nanda. Mm-hmm. Nanda. Yes. Yeah. It's an Indian name, and I've always really loved Indian culture, India. And it means bliss.
Beautiful.
When he was born, he didn't look like, I had names like Anthony and Joseph, and I had all this list. You do the list of names right before your baby's born. And I looked at him, and he looked like a little Buddha. I'm like, you can't name this kid. Like, there's no way.
That's not a John. Wait a minute.
It is not. He's not any of them. None of them. In fact, it took us 6 months to name him. He was baby butler and baby boy and baby, and people are like, nobody liked that. But I'm like, look, the name hasn't come to him yet. And the nurse was telling me, you've got to get your Social Security card for him, and he can't get that until he's got a name. And I'm like, I know.
What'd you put on the birth certificate?
The birth certificate.
Yeah, what'd you put on the birth certificate?
Well, it had to be they can do it, and they put baby butler for the time being, and then you go back when you get all the other paperwork done. It's a long time ago, but yeah, then finally he was, and it's Nityananda Bhakti Rasa Butler.
Oh, you went from one extreme to the other.
I did, and it means eternal bliss and devotional dancer. Wow. I don't know why, but I was reading a lot of Indian stories and the Upanishads and books. I liked books on religion. I've read, all of it. Yeah. But I really like the Indian stories are magnificent.
That is
and
beautiful.
So Nityananda was a prince, and I thought, hey, this is like a little prince, and I didn't want to call him Buddha. That just seemed too weird. But not that Nityananda wasn't weird, but it's a mouthful. And then yeah,
that is great.
Yeah, that's the artist part coming. That's the artist part coming through.
That's fantastic. I love the artist stuff too because. Like we learned, or like you said with the journaling, creativity can come out of all this, and you explore and learn things about yourself and your healing process that you don't know, and you really can realize that you got more in you than you know. If
And you do. And in fact, there is that sort of, I mean, I remember like sleeping a lot and being like just wanting to turn the lights out, in the very beginning. But I think, you're a year, or have you come all the way through year one?
Yeah, I had about 15 months.
Right. So that first year, there are all those events and various things. And
Right.
It's just brutal. It's brutal. And that's brutal. Dealing with people's, everything is brutal.
Yeah.
It's so impossible. The second year for me, and it's different for everybody because we all process differently, was like waking up from the anesthesia,
Perfect. That's perfect.
Do you feel that? Like, yeah, it was sort of like, holy crap, this really happened.
And you're occupied by all those things in the first year. That's why, and then you come around to the second year and it's like, holy crap, this is really my life, and then you try to settle.
And am I going to do it the same as I did it last year?
No, you don't. And you try to settle into what you are now and re-identify and everything. So
yeah, but that's a lot. And the term, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm going to say it. I'm really sorry for your loss, Tom.
Oh, thank you. And you too.
But more so is I'm wishing you that you open to love and joy and the things that bring us back to life. That's my wish for you, because that's what's needed to go through this whole thing. It's incredible.
Yes, and thank you, and of course my deepest sincerity to you too. This is it never ends. So I mean, you've talked about it where you are, and I appreciate it. Yeah. You're part of my process, so all of this.
Yeah, that's important. I love that.
Yeah, and doing this is really helpful because I've learned from people's stories and all the different elements of what people are bringing to the healing process now has helped me too to explore different things that I might need and realize that too. So, I'm going through my story too. My dad died when I was 10. I grew up without a dad, and then, not till a little bit later on.
And then you were a dad and your son is gone. That's a really,
Yeah, and that's so far, it seems so far removed, but now I'm realizing too what I am because of that and how I deal with things or how I have dealt my whole life with things or whatever the case is.
Isn't that incredible? That's the gift part, is that one would think, I don't want to think about that. That's really horrible, but it's not. It's like, that was what you were given in life. And you probably might not have gone back to look at that way until you became the father. And then the loss brought up, oh, wait, I lost my father, and then it comes around. And I was a father, and I don't even get to be a father anymore in the way that I wanted to be, and then what is a father? Because I only had 10 years where, it's incredible.
Yes, you're like, all over the place.
Yeah.
Help.
I know, totally. But you know what? I am so impressed with you saying help. Because it's really easy to get into one's, like, I could do this, I'm strong, that was the past or whatever. But the past is interesting, it holds some precious information that can help us to become a deeper, wiser person, a more thoughtful, more caring person in the world,
Yes.
And bring some compassion.
Yes, and I've experienced that to a large degree. I've changed internally in that regard to a high degree. I always thought I was, I guess.
Right.
But then the inner part of me is kind of coarse, where I'm like, I'm sick of people. I'm sick of this, whatever. And I was in the people business almost my whole life. But but people are a pain in the rear end too. So I don't know. But,
Right.
But now I truly feel it, and I love it because I've always said that I have it, and now I feel it, and I really do. And I have deep love and deep compassion for people. I'm not an empath. I don't enter into their grief or anything, but I I can immediately come back and be part of the understanding. And that's been important.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's so
I love
important.
it. It's a growth process, and it's part of me. I've always wanted to be present like that. So that's been a good thing that's come out
Me
of it.
too.
But you know what, Jane?
Yeah.
You said it in the beginning when we were talking, I think before we even went on, but you said this is going to go so fast as we get talking. And it has, right. And it is. So,
yeah.
But like I said, we're going to have all the links to your all your material. And I want to encourage everybody to get the Fine Art of Grieving. I am going to actually have to get the actual book this time. I don't read like that much anymore.
I'm happy to send you a copy.
Oh my gosh, Tom. I didn't say it for that reason.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I know, but I think this is a nice connection, and I appreciate you bringing me on, and I'd like for you to read it because I think there'll be things in there that will speak to you, and the little things that I've discovered that you might not have seen yet. I'm excited for you to dig into that, and then I hope that at some point you come back and communicate with me about what you're going through and so forth, because it's a wonderful connection. I appreciate
thank you.
it.
Absolutely. It's been a great conversation. I tell everybody already, everyone I've had such a privilege of having great people on, and I'm like, we're going to have to talk again.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
I don't know. Maybe I'm going to be doing these more than once a week or something, because I'm so interested in what people are doing. And I've met some great people, yourself included, and I'm happy we made this connection too.
Thank you.
And I thank you for that. I do, and I love the subject right now. So I'm definitely going to read it, and because I listen to audiobooks mostly because I'm so busy and doing things all around, but I'd be more than happy to read it, definitely. And I want to see it. I want to see the art and everything in there and how it connects. And I love to promote people's things, so I can better do that if I do that. So we'll get it out to everybody for sure.
That's fantastic.
So, Jane, I always ask people this, or I try to, what maybe didn't we cover, or something that has arisen for you in your whole process? Just, there's always these kind of, these moniker things that come up for us that, we're like, oh, that's like, people don't seem to be hitting on this, and I just love this, or, something like that. Do you have something like that you'd like to leave us with?
I think more, the thing that always comes up for me is that you can have a wonderful life after losing a child. I have a wonderful life. I have love in my life. I have joy in my life. I have interest. I've developed. You'll also have a self.
Yeah.
You'll get a self back. It won't be the self you had. Like you said, parts, that remain. But you will actually, it might even be better than you've ever been. And that's the case for me. But it does take work. It takes engaging that monster, And in fact, I don't even know that I think of grief as a monster anymore. Like I said, I think it's a gift. It starts out as, oh my God, this is the most awful, ugly, messy, painful thing I've ever had to be entangled in, to, wow, I just popped out as this new person in this new world. And I am so grateful that I've been through that process. But like I said, I don't ever want to do that again.
I've heard it described as a bad family member. Like you can't get rid of it. It's going to be there, but you learn to deal with it. So
well, and see, so that one part that you said I disagree with about you can't get rid of it because I don't have grief anymore.
Right. We can qualify that for sure. Yeah. The grief, I guess the experience, maybe we'll put it, that you can't get rid of that. But
no, I get what you're saying. It's like that because it lasts so long, it becomes incorporated into your life. But there's a point at where you can wean it off, that it's no longer necessary because you've been through the grief. If you do the grief, At some point, you will have done all the bits and pieces that maybe every once in a while something will pop up, but nothing like those first few years. I mean, you still have a lot of work to do. Yeah. But it sounds like it's speeded up for you because of what you're doing now. When you engage it, it opens up quickly. It took me a while to engage mine because I thought that was it. I thought that my life is ruined. And so I didn't get fully into intentional healing until I realized that I actually could heal, because people kept telling me this will never go away. And that's an unfair thing to tell people. I think that it's more fair to say it's a process, and at some point you'll transform and you won't need grief anymore. It may come up here and there, but you won't need it. Whereas you don't think you need it in the beginning, but you do need it because it is the process of the loss. It's going through the loss.
You know what I just did too? Is that I totally agree with that. And I've even said it in previous episodes, but I find myself falling back into the same vernacular and everything that people use because you're around,
it's very popular
and you
right
hear
now.
It from so many people, you hear these cliches and everything, and they kind of stick with you. So then when you're trying to verbalize something that can come in, even though that's not your, because I sit there and I say, no, you can get rid of the grief and the pain and everything and have that lesson. You don't lose the love. And so that's all there all the time.
That's it.
Yeah.
The very last line of my book. It's not a what do you call it? A spoiler alert. This is the last line. After all, love and art transform and outlast grief.
Beautiful ending to our conversation right here. The way you ended your book and the way we will end our conversation. Thank you, Jane Edberg. Such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much. And I'm wishing you everything in your healing process. And do connect with me if you have any questions, or and then I'll need your contact information to send you.
Thank you. And the same to you with your healing as well. Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.